Hello and welcome to Proconnotation Points Video Snark. I'm making my way through Stalking Jack the Ripper by Kerri Maniscalco. If you haven't seen the other videos about the book, please make sure that you do or else you might be confused. Links will be posted below. Chapter 21, The Wretched Truth, Wadsworth Residence, Belgrave Square, 30th of September 1888. So they go home. Audrey is angry at her father, at Blackburn, but also at Nathaniel because he led their father to Audrey. After establishing that Amelia and Lisa will soon be leaving, we finally get around to that promised scolding. He goes on for a while about how did Audrey seriously think that he would react upon finding out about her hobby. He also talks for length about her reputation, which I don't think that a lot of 21st century people really understand. Women didn't exactly have a lot back in the day. Their reputation was the only thing that they had any semblance of control over. So yeah, it was kind of a big deal if a girl was out doing something like sticking her nose into crime scenes. But what of mother's insistence that I could be both strong and beautiful? I'm still firmly on team 19th century women had strength that was vastly different than what it is in the 21st century, mainly because it's the truth. Father then lays down the law and tells her that if she's not charming according to both his and society's standards, he will literally turn her out onto the street. And I've talked about this enough throughout the book, but that is an insanely awful thing for somebody to do to a young lady in the late 1800s. But Audrey is more baffled by his hypocrisy. Father wants to keep Audrey safe from harm so much that he'd toss her out onto the street. Father leaves, and Audrey then turns her anger towards Nathaniel. She asks what Father bribed him with in order to sell his own sister out like that, but Nathaniel acts like something is the matter. However, he won't just spit it out and dithers for a while. He eventually says that Uncle has been trying to complete a successful transplant for a while, but it was the final straw that divided him and Father, if you will remember, because all of the medicine and science in the world couldn't save Mother. He goes on to say that Uncle has been keeping secrets from Audrey and seems to think that he's dangerous, should be kept locked up, and that he's been doing experiments. Ah, so he's firmly on team Uncle clearly did it, even with the new evidence. He goes on to say that shortly after their own mother died, Thomas's mother was experiencing health issues of her own. Thomas's father went to Uncle for help, but Uncle was also unable to save her. But according to Nathaniel, Thomas is obsessed with finding a cure for the issues that killed his own mother, which makes Audrey think about how Thomas asked her to remove the gallbladder from the cadaver a few chapters earlier, and also how she was certain that a gallbladder was missing from at least one of the murder victims. And we're back on Team Thomas is the killer. But Audrey tries not to jump to any conclusions about Thomas simply because he enjoys doing things that most people find gross. But at the same time, she can't help but think that Thomas was the sort of person who'd do anything to get what he wanted, including murder. And maybe she's letting her own feelings over Thomas cloud her judgment. Chapter 22, Saucy Jack, Wadsworth Residence, Belgrave Square, 1st of October, 1888. Audrey continues to muse over the idea of Thomas being Jack the Ripper. She seems to think that the things Jack said in his letter don't quite match up with Thomas's personality, but she'd also apparently been missing how Thomas and Uncle have been doing experimentations behind her back this entire time, and she thinks that her own emotions are clouding her judgment. Lisa comes in and complains about how they have to leave. She says somebody is throwing a masked ball in which guests are encouraged to come as Jack the Ripper. Audrey says that the entire thing sounds to be in extremely poor taste. Lisa agrees to an extent, but goes on to say that nobody deserves to be murdered and encourages Audrey to work harder at finding the killer. My cousin was smart, unabashedly feminine, and comfortable playing by her own version of society's rules. Once again, I cry out that I want to read about Lisa, not Audrey. At least Lisa's trying to be a 19th century girl. Audrey returns her attention to the letter printed in the paper. She can't trust Blackburn anymore, and was surprised that the letter was indeed printed. I guess catching a serial killer is stronger than one's need to get laid. She goes back through the evidence that she knows. Most of them had connections to Uncle, but they also mostly had connections to Father. She tries to review moments of uncovering new info when she was with Thomas, and wonders if he really is that good of an actor to feign illegitimate surprise like that. She mainly just thinks about her father, and how it's possible that he could have committed those murders while high on opium. But thinking about her father also leads her to think about Blackburn, and if they're hiding a suitor from her, what else could they be hiding? She eventually returns her attention to the paper, where there's a second letter from Jack. He says that there's more victims and thanks the paper editor for not publishing the first letter right away. Father comes in and is angry that Audrey is reading the paper, because of course she is. Amelia and Lisa leave. I don't care about Amelia because she was barely a character. Audrey thinks about the things that Nathaniel had told her about their mother's death and uncle's unsuccessful surgery. Father then goes back to Audrey about how she's reading the paper and surely she'd like to be turned out onto the streets. Audrey then makes a passing comment about how he knows more about streetwalkers than she does. She then stands and says that respect is earned and not given. She's not some horse for him to command as he will, but then goes on to say that she'd rather be out on the streets than in such misery. And look, if this book took place in the 21st century, it'd be all like, yes, queen. But as I keep saying, this is the 19th century. Living on the streets was miserable. Being a woman was miserable. She goes over to Uncle's, where she finds him in a state. They released him and his belongings, but they didn't give a flying fig about how they returned his things, so everything is in disarray, and some things are just missing. And, geez, Uncle might not have been a violent man before, but unlawfully arresting people and stealing their stuff would make anybody turn into a serial killer. He screams at Audrey and Thomas to fix his lab. Audrey, however, is not having any of that and says that the maids will clean things up while they wait in the other room. Uncle accepts this for some reason. They get settled with tea, although things are awkward between Audrey and Thomas following their fight earlier. Eventually, Audrey brings up about Thomas's mother. Uncle scoffs and says that it's been such a long time since they did a surgery like that and that it doesn't have anything to do with Jack. But Audrey brings up about how Uncle was almost married to one of the victims and that maybe some things will come around to bite us in the butt. Thomas wants to tell Audrey, but Uncle is insistent that he not do that. Audrey gets angry and says that there's a serial killer on the loose and that they're too busy fighting about nonsense, which, big mood, I'm waiting for all of this to get to the point. But Thomas says that they never really got anywhere with their experiments, and Thomas's mother was too sick for any sort of experimental procedure. The best that they've been able to do was to reattach a finger. He goes on to say that he never meant to keep any of this from Audrey, but that they got so busy with the murders that none of it seemed remotely important. Audrey then turns back to Uncle and demands that he tell her everything about his former fiancée. He says that the thing that broke them up was his science obsession. She made him pick, and obviously he picked science. Seemed as though she had a strong religious objection to that entire thing, and her own pride became her downfall. She ended up penniless and on the streets. He continues on to say that she half did it out of spite in order to hurt Uncle. Although, at the end of the day, I think that the only person that she hurt the most was herself. Uncle is getting by okay, whereas she obviously ended up murdered. Audrey asks if Miss Smith really could have been one of Jack's victims, and Uncle agrees before quickly hurrying off. Thanks for listening to my book Snark on YouTube. If you're enjoying this, please hit that subscribe button. I post a new Snark video every Monday, but if you're eager for more Snark, then you can check out my review of The Plan. If you've already seen that, then you can head over to Tumblr for my main book Snarks. And if all of that is somehow still not enough for you, then you can become a patron supporter for just $1 a month and read a bunch of bonus Snarks that isn't up anywhere else. See you next week, guys! Amelia and Lisa leave. I don't care about Amelia because she was barely a character. Yes, what? Amelia and Lisa leave. I don't care about Amelia because she was... Stop it!